Welcome back. This time we're going to be talking about session 1.2, which is the second session in chapter 1. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to talk about in this session is going to be writing your page body. So we already wrote the header and we understood a lot of things about the header. So now we're going to start talking about the body. The body is where all of the stuff that you want to actually have on your website is actually going to go. So these are elements that we're going to be putting into our body of text. So we can have a header, we can have a footer, we can have some individual headings, we can have some paragraphs, definitely things like this. It really helps if you want to sketch out your new page before you start to code. I do this a lot. Every time that I start with a new website, I will sit down with a piece of paper and a pencil and I'll start sketching it out, similar to the example on the page. So I will say, this is where I want the header, this is where I want the nav bar, this is where I want the body stuff, and this is what I want to put on the side. Before HTML5, when we were still in HTML 4.1, most programmers would use division tags or div, D-I-V, to separate out these sections, and we would give them an ID called header or an ID called nav. In HTML5, we actually introduced them as individual elements. So we have an element called header, and we have an element called nav, and we have an element called section, elements called articles and asides and footers. These are all elements that are new with HTML5. And you can see from the list on the side where it says the new HTML5, if it has HTML5 in bold, that means those are new things for HTML5. If you look at an older website, you will find that they use divisions because that's what we used to do before HTML5 came along and people started using it. So a lot of older programmers that have been programming for a while will still use divisions because they just haven't moved on to that HTML5 thing. So it's really important for you to be able to recognize when you see a piece of code, especially if it was developed by a programmer before, what those different sections are. These are some sectioning elements that work inside your page body. So we have our address, which is just contact information. It can be used easily to merge into like a Google Maps or something like that. We have articles, which is a self-contained composition of a document, such as a newspaper story. When you think of an article, you don't really want the formatting styles that go with the article to affect the rest of the styles in the page and vice versa, because articles are kind of different. Same with an aside. So aside is related to the main article, but maybe not the main article. So it's some information on the side. We use it kind of for comments or little things on the side. We have our basic body and footer and header. So those basic things, we still have the H1 through H6. So these are a default heading, H1 being the largest, most significant title, and then going down to H6. You can have an H1, an H2, an H3, so on and so forth. And these are just heading elements that you can use in your CSS to make sure that they follow a specific pattern, like your H1s are always going to be larger than your H2s. And we also have a nav section and a section by itself. So nav is where you're going to be putting your nav bar, your menu bar, your section that's going to allow you to navigate through your page. In this section, we're going to talk about defining the sections of the page body. And we're going to be going through the tutorial that's on page 25. So we know that we want to have an about section, and we kind of have thought about how we wanted that done. We want to have a header, we want to have an article that's going to say some of the details about us, and we're going to add a footer. So let's go ahead and add in those tags. So we can write header, and inside of our header, we're going to have a H1 tag. So that first level entry of a header. So we're going to do curbside tie as our header. Next, we're going to write our article. Remember, article is a self-contained section that's going to have some information in it. This is kind of where the body of your text in this case is going to go. And we are going to use a H1 tag again to write about us. That's going to go inside of our article. And then last, we're going to have our footer. Now, sometimes headers and footers sound like, well, do we have a head and we have a header? We have a footer and a foot. Yes. So this head up here is completely different than a header inside of your text here. So for our footer, we're going to have our curbside tie at 411 Beldy Drive, in Charlotte, North Carolina, 28201, and we're going to give a phone number, 555-1151. All right, so we've got some text here. I'm going to go ahead and save and then refresh over here. Again, if you're just opening this back up again and you didn't have this open, you can always right-click, open in default browser, and it'll pop up there as well. And it'll have that. So we have a couple of pieces of information here. You notice that our header used H1 and our article used H1, but these are different sizes. That's because the browser knows the difference between a header and an article. And those are going to be different things. They're going to look different. So in this case, the header is going to be a little bit larger in text than the H1 that is going to be inside of an article. And so we have the different sections broken out in our page. It's really important to do that. Okay, so if those are sectioning elements, those are things we use to section out sections of our page. The next is going to be our grouping and text level elements. Grouping elements are things that are going to group pieces of information together. So our grouping elements, again, like our divs or perhaps main, we might have figures and we might have things inside of there. We also have our lists. So our descriptive lists, our ordered lists, our unordered lists, these are all going to go under grouping because we use them to group information inside of them. So like a list element or a list item, LI, which is any individual item inside of a list. If you have an unordered list, you're going to have bullets. An ordered list, you're going to have numbers. But say we have an unordered list with bullets, and underneath that, I'm going to have 3 list items, LI. You can put text level elements inside of your list element. Say you want to have some things in there. You want to have some text. You want to throw in some breaks. You want to throw in different things with spans. You can do that at the text level element portion inside of your grouping elements. So all of these grouping elements, you can kind of think of them as they contain something inside of them. Sometimes it's just text, and that's fine. Sometimes it's just a caption, or it's just a header, or it's something simple, just a list of items. But you can have things inside of it, groups of details. Our text level elements, these are used more to define and format your sections of text. So this is where you do your bolds and your italics and your underlines and your hyperlinks. This is usually an individual item that you are going to do something with. So if I want to bold a word inside of my paragraph, those are going to be text level elements to bold it. And the paragraph is going to be a grouping element because it's going to hold a lot of words. It doesn't really matter if you really get the concept of grouping elements versus text level elements, as long as you know what all of these elements are. So these are 2 lists that came straight out of your textbook. So you can go find them in your textbook in this section and make sure that you take some time to read through all of the descriptions for each of the different elements. You're going to use different elements in different ways throughout your coding. So it's really important for you to understand what is a figure, what is a quote, what is an email versus something else. So really important to keep those straight. The next thing that we're going to do is start adding some text. Now, the book was kind enough to help us out here, and we don't have to manually type all of this. It has given us a page here called pages.txt. And if I double click on that, you will see that it has given us some text. This was intentional because they don't want you to have to type it all. So I can just copy and paste. So I'm going to copy, Control C, or you could always right click and click copy. Both of those work. Come back to our about page and paste. Now, that's not right. We need to put those inside of a grouping element. So we are going to add a couple of paragraphs here. We're going to have a paragraph here where we're going to put this one inside of a paragraph. We're going to go ahead and make another paragraph. And we're going to put this second one inside of it. I'm just doing Control X and Control V to copy and paste. And then the last one, I can go down and grab those, X and Control V to get those 3 paragraphs inside of my article. Now when I come over here, you'll see that those 3 things show up as paragraphs. If we didn't have them as paragraphs, if we just showed them pasted in there, they would all run together and there would be no hard returns between the paragraphs, no separation at all. So this is where we like to do our grouping elements to make sure that we can group things together and make them look the way that we want. Important thing to remember with your group level elements is that you always have your starting and your ending tag. Don't forget those. The next thing that we're going to do on this page is going to be doing our text level elements. So a couple of things to make them a little more formatted the way that we want. Up at the top here, under the About Us, the Curbside Tie. This is the name of the restaurant, and we kind of want that to be emphasized. So we're going to bold it, and we are going to create a strong tag, and then we're going to close our strong tag. As you can see, a lot of the work is done for me. I'm not clicking anything special except an enter or a space here and there or a tab, and it's filling some of that information in with me. As you can see, I've put Curbside Tie in between two strong tags, which means when I refresh this, my Curbside Tie here is coming up bolded. That's what strong does. Strong bolds us. We are also going to add some italics down here where Curbside Tie will deliver. And we are going to do what's called a emphasized text, an EM. And we will close the EM before the period. We're going to close before the period. So we're going to refresh that. And you can see now Curbside Tie will deliver is now italicized. And the last one that we're going to do, actually we're going to do two more. We are going to cite something and we are going to call a quote. So in this case, if you read through this, contact us to cater your next party and experience what Carolina Traveler calls the finest Asian food on or off the streets in Charlotte. So we are going to cite our Carolina Traveler because Carolina Traveler is the one that we are citing, the person that we are citing. And then the finest Asian food, we are going to put in quote tags, Q. And we are going to put the end Q before the period in the end. So when I hit refresh now, you can see it takes Carolina Traveler and it italicizes it as a cite. And then the finest Asian food on or off the streets in Charlotte is put between two quotes because we wanted to quote it. I didn't have to put the double quote reference here. Excuse me. I didn't have to put the double quote because the Q does it for me and lets me know that I want to put a quote there. So that is your text level and your grouping level examples. Okay, we are not starting in on our style sheets until chapter 2. However, we are going to link to some pre-created style sheets so that you can see how that's going to work so that when we get into chapter 2 working with our CSS, you'll already know how to add the part to HTML that's necessary. A style sheet is simply a set of rules to describe how the page is displayed. We like to keep our style sheets in an external document, which means we don't want to have all of our style entries inside of our HTML. We want to link to our style sheet, which we are going to hold in a separate file. That way, when it comes to changing things, if you're changing a formatting of something, go to the style sheet and change it there, and you don't have to change your base code in your HTML file. Same thing, if you're not affecting any of the formatting, change your code in the HTML, but you don't have to touch the CSS file if it's not necessary. So it's really important to keep those two things straight. We like to call those external style sheets, and we'll talk about the different types of style sheets in the next slide or two. But for this one, a basic style sheet, a cascading style sheet is a specific language used in style sheets. So style sheet is just a set of rules, but CSS or cascading style sheets is the language that is used in style sheets that we use to describe things. What we do is in our HTML page, we are going to link the style sheet to our HTML page so that when the HTML page gets run, it will find that link and it will go load in all of those styles that we need. This text, link, href, file name, relation, style sheet, is going to be the reference that you're going to be writing in every style sheet link that you're going to do. So we need to know what the name of the file is where you're storing that style sheet, and we need to know what type of file it is. You don't have to link just style sheets. You can link a lot of different things. In this case, we're linking a style sheet. So we give it a relation, which is the link between the relationship between the link and the file, and we call it a style sheet. When your browser reads that, it's going to go, oh, this is a style sheet. I'm going to be adding some styles, and it kind of puts it inside of style tags, and it makes it all happy. So this is how we link our CSS to our HTML document. Make sure this goes in the header. It is always in the head. It is not in the body. Don't add it to the body, add it to the head. So the book was very kind enough to give us some style sheets to work with, since we aren't going to get into that until chapter 2. Just to look at them, we have our base style sheet, which looks like this. This is our base style sheet. It's always really useful to have a base style sheet for your entire site. Everything that's defaulting for the site, and then add in extra style sheets as you go along if you need to make new style sheets for different sections. So we are going to import or link our style sheet. Cascading style sheets are going to link in order. So they will have the first style sheet hit first, and then the second style sheet will go in order next. It will override anything in the first style sheet if it finds it. So if you define something in your style sheet that your body is going to be a certain text style, and then in the second style sheet you change that, the second style sheet is the one that's approved and used by the browser. But again, we will talk about that more in chapter 2. In this case, we are going to link with a hyperlink reference to our CT_base CSS. And it is a relation of a style sheet. We are also going to link a second file. We are going to link base, and we are going to link layout2. .css. And these are the two, again, following the tutorial from the book. So these are the two style sheets that they want to use. As you can see, if I hit save and I refresh, all of a sudden everything changed. Oh my gosh, that looks so much prettier. How nice was that? So what they've done is they've applied the style sheet to the entire page. It's really useful when we get into style sheets to understand how those are done and the order in which they're done. If we chose not to do our layout2, by the way, hotkey for commenting, select what you want to comment, Control-K-C. To comment, Control-K-U, C for comment, U for uncomment, will allow us to comment and uncomment quickly. So you'll see the difference between the base and the layout. The layout 2 is the one that really made a difference. The base was pretty boring. That just added in maybe some sizing and making things a little bit different. But taking this layout 2, again, uncommenting with the Control-K-U, adds in all of this with the little sides and having it in, adding the footer with a bar across it, changing some of the other things with the background so it looks a little different. Some of the fun things that you can do with HTML5 is you can start working with a lot of character sets and character codes and special characters. And you can use things like bullets and arrows and some fun little characters like the copyright symbol or something like that. The way that we use character sets. Okay, first off, let's explain what characters are. So the first set of character sets that we talk about is ASCII, ASCII, which is from the American Standard Code for Information Exchange, or Interchange, excuse me. And it is basically the English alphabet and a lot of standard characters, your exclamation mark, your hashtag, your periods, your quotes. Those things are all pretty standard, and those exist in your ASCII character set. Unfortunately, over time, we've realized that the basic ASCII character set just didn't cut it. There is not enough pictures and enough images in there for us to only use the ASCII character set. So we go on to either ISO 88591, which is a Latin one, which has 255 characters, as opposed to, if you think about the English alphabet being 26 characters, maybe another, 15, 20. There's not a whole lot in ASCII. You add in the Latin, and now you have 255 characters. Now we're getting at least most languages with their special characters and a lot of other little images. After that, we have Unicode, which extends it beyond anything you could imagine. Almost every character created in any language on the planet. So 65,000 characters. So you're talking about, Chinese alphabets and Russian alphabets and Latin and Greek. And all of these are going to be included in your Unicode. Okay. When you want to add one of those special characters, you're going to use a ampersand, which is that little and symbol, hashtag, and code, and whatever the code is going to be. So if the code is 169 for the copyright symbol, we're going to use ampersand, hashtag, 169, and then always remember to include a semicolon at the end. The semicolon is going to tell it that's the extent of the image or the character that I want to include. So it's going to be ampersand, hashtag, then the character code, and then a semicolon. If you can remember that, that'll help. There's also a couple of special characters that are used so often that we've actually given them words, because trying to find copyright at hashtag 169 every time gets a little bit annoying. So they've actually created one that is an ampersand copy with a semicolon at the end, and that means copyright. So it refers back to that hashtag 169 for you with a word that you can probably remember easier. The other one that we use a lot is our non-breaking space. Remember, spaces don't matter in HTML, so it's really important that if you want to add 2 spaces in between 2 items, you need to add a non-breaking space. So it's an ampersand NBSP for non-breaking space. Don't forget the semicolon at the end. We would like to add a special character down in the footer. So in the footer, after curbside tie, right here between tie and the 411, we want to add a bullet or a single dot. And the code that we're going to use for that is going to be code number 8226. So remember, it's an ampersand, hashtag 8226, and then a semicolon. And when we do this, it is going to add in this little dot right here, because we want to have that little dot there to differentiate between the name and the address. So we have added in this special character here. We also want to add a second bullet after the zip code before the phone number. So we are going to, copy and paste that there. Again, Control S, and looks good. And then the last thing is adding that secondary space here. And I did it instinctively, adding in 2 spaces between the state. But remember, HTML is only going to add 1 space there, because any collection of non-breaking or spaces makes a single space. So we have to add a non-breaking space. So remember, ampersand NBSP semicolon, without the L, is going to add a non-breaking space, which is going to go here. And now we have 2 spaces. You can see now we have 2 spaces. So that was just adding in our special characters. At this point, we're going to start working with images, and we're going to talk about inline images. So HTML has moved so far beyond just basic adding text to the fact that we have now included embedded content in our web pages. We have images, we have audio, video, we even have interactive games existing in a single web page. So we call these all interactive elements, items that we can touch and do something with, we can play with, or we can click. This would be like a canvas, which we'll talk about a little further on, or say a sound clip, or anything that's embedded. If you've ever seen, like in this case, I probably have this video embedded in your D2L environment. So I've taken a link and I've been able to embed that using frames or iframes, maybe even just basic images, different objects in video. Often these will include a source file. They may not always include a source file, but they probably will include a source file in some sense. That's just going to be, if you're referring to an image, what's the image file? A lot of times using the ADA, Americans with Disability rules, we like to add an alternate attribute, an ALT, an alt attribute. And what that does is it describes what is the content. If it doesn't load or if it needs to be read by a screen reader, we want to be able to see, in this case, screen readers can read your screen and say, this is a picture of 2 kids walking on the beach. if you can't see the picture, at least it has some sort of text to describe what it's doing there. We can also include a height or a width attribute to give it the size of that content if we want it to be larger or smaller than the base object that was put in there. So if I have a very large image, say, 500 by 1000 on its size, and I want it to be a little thumbnail that's, 50 by 50, I can give it a height and a width, and that will set it that way in the HTML that I'm going to be using. We often call them inline images because they're usually placed just like our text level elements. Remember, not our grouping, but our text level. We're just placing them right down there as though they are an entity all on themselves. They're an inline image. In this one, we are going to replace our H1 or our header up here that says curbside Thai with an image for the restaurant. So we are going to add in inline image, img, and our source, which is going to be CT logo 2. So we're going to use the second logo. And we're going to put in an alt tag of curbside Thai. And then we are going to close our image tag. We do not need to have a separate ending tag because there's no interior content to this image. So we can Control S to save. And you can see now it's replaced it with the logo from the restaurant. Next, instead of having the About Us header here, we are going to actually be adding an image. Again, inline images. We're going to do our source, and in this case, we are going to do our CT photo 1. And we're not going to bother with an alt tag because it isn't really that important. And remember to always close your image tag. In this case, we have this picture of this woman, and she's going to be sitting there hanging out in line. If my browser were bigger or smaller, you can see the text is going to change. This is part of the CSS that we're going to be talking about soon. So you can see how it makes it bigger or smaller and adds those extra sides on the side, and it allows the text to roll or wrap around the woman's picture. The last section of session 1.2 is going to be working with block quotes and other elements. So there's a couple of other elements that we want to talk about, and we just didn't have enough to really explain them so far. So we're going to talk about those. The first is probably one of the more important ones, which is a line break. This would be adding a hard return or hitting an enter key. Remember, spaces don't count, and so hitting the enter key doesn't do anything. But if you want to add a line break, you can put in a break empty element tag BR with a closing tag, and that will cause a line break. Along with that is another empty element called a horizontal rule, which is just a line. You can affect that with its colors and its schemes that go along with it, but a horizontal rule is simply a horizontal line that goes from one side to the other. Another item that we like to use in this course is going to be our block quotes. These are usually things that contain quotes so that they can look like it's a quote entry. If you've seen any of the comments that they do on certain websites, they can have your comment in between quotes so it looks like it's a quote. So a block quote is designed that way and will allow you, as we get a little further on, to describe how you want your quotes to look to make it look pretty. Another one we like is our address, like I talked before. It can be turned into a hyperlink with your CSS, and then that will allow you, if you have an address on your phone, you can click the address and it'll immediately pull up Google Maps or whichever map program you have on your phone and go find that address because it knows it's an address field. So being able to do things like that are things that we do like to add in our HTML. One of the things to keep an eye on is what we call an accessible rich internet application or an ARIA. And this is designed to be understood by your screen readers or other accommodation programs. When you go through and you design your website, you want to make sure that it is universally available to anybody, even if there is certain accommodations that they need. To do that, you can set the role of an element. What is the element doing there? Why is it there? And that will help the screen reader programs understand if this is just fluff. Is this important? Is this a header? Is this an alert? Is this a progress bar? Is it a log? Is it a dialogue? Is it something that's important? So you can give a role to an element and your screen readers are designed to read that. At this point, we're going to be playing around with some of the pre-created pages that we have to work with the block quotes and the address and a couple of other things. So we're going to start with our reviews page. Now, our reviews page, right now, if I open in my browser, it'll pop up and this is all it says right here. But you may notice that the reviews page starts with this _txt. The very first thing that you need to do with any pre-created page like this is to either save as or rename. So in this case, I'm going to just rename because I'm not worried about saving as because I have extra copies of this, so it's not a problem. And get rid of that txt. The other option is to come up to File and do Save As and save it as reviews without the txt. Now you have the file that is linked with our other links, which you'll see in section 1.3. But for this case, for our reviews, we are going to make sure you always fill out your author here and your date, because I'm actually going to be checking this when I grade your work to make sure that you have filled this out and that you've actually done the work. A lot of this stuff I know you can find online. I don't want you to do that. So we're going to do that. And then we're going to go to our pages here, and you can see we have our reviews. So we have 4 reviews that we are going to add into our reviews page. So we are going to copy that. We're going to look for this section doing the reviews, which we have found. And we are going to paste these directly under the reviews H1 in our article. So here we have our article tab. We have our header at the top, which we expect, and our footer at the bottom. And then we have our article where it says reviews. Each one of these we are going to place inside of a block quote. Block quote. And when we place it inside of a block quote, we put the block quote there, and then we put the block quote at the end. When we do this, we have information inside of them. So this is going to be a paragraph here. We're going to put a paragraph starting here, and we're going to move the end of the paragraph down to off the streets of Carolina. We're going to V. After that, we are going to do another paragraph for the name of who sent it, who said it. So we are going to do another paragraph here. Just to give you an idea before I do all of these. Oh, it's going to yell because we just renamed it. I should have known better. That's what the block quote is going to do for you. Now, in this case, the block quote is using a lot of CSS to make it look prettier than a basic block quote. And that's okay. We don't mind that. I'm just using a couple of copy and pastes here to get the rest of the block quote for the second and third. We can show that one and see how that's throwing that in there. Now we still have 2 more to go. So we're going to do our block quote here. In this case, it was really small. It just had the one best in show, best in. So it may be easier in your case to just type the closing P tag and the opening P tag, but I'm already kind of going down this route. And then the last one. So you can see spaces don't matter. It doesn't matter if I have extra spaces anywhere and what that does to anything. I like to make it look nice, and I like to format my pages to make sure that they do everything the way that I want. In Visual Studio Code, you can right click and you can select Format Document. When you do this, it'll kind of pull things together. It won't get rid of extra spaces because a lot of programmers like to leave those spaces in to keep an eye on separation between things. So it won't remove extra lines in between. But what it will do is it'll kind of shore everything up with these tab spacing so that you can see how the nesting is going to work. So that is our reviews page. The next thing that we're going to update is our catering page. So we're going to come back over here and we're going to find our, there it goes, catering page here. And I'm going to, again, rename or save as to get rid of the text. I'm going to always fill in my name and my date. That's already in there. And then for this one, we are going to locate the section containing the information about the catering service. So we can scroll back down here, and here is our catering service. So we can copy that, go back over to our catering, to our article for catering, paste it down there, and then we're going to do our paragraphs to make sure everything gets indented correctly. So I'm going to go there and, sorry, P. I'm actually going to come up here and grab here to here, and then I can just paste that there, paste it there, and then close my P tag here. When I want to view that, open in my default browser, and you can see it's done my paragraphs for me to make me happy there. The next thing we're going to do with this one is we're going to be adding an image underneath our catering tag. So we are going to be adding an image. Our source is going to be our CT underscore photo 2 with an empty string as our alt tab. And again, don't forget to save, and it'll add this picture for our catering, and that'll make that good. And then we will do our contact us page. So that is the next one that we're going to do here. We're going to rename our contact us text. And then for our contact us, we are going to add in the information from our handy dandy little pages text. See, back over to here in our article in V. In this case, we are going to be setting our curbside contact here as a paragraph. We are going to be setting this as an address because that's the address. We are going to be saying these two as paragraphs as well. Very important. If we didn't put them in paragraphs, they would all jumble together because spaces don't matter. And if we look at this one, we will see that we have our contact us with our address text here. Really important part that I had missed with our address text, we have to add breaks between these. As you can see, it didn't add a break, and it just did the whole curbside tie at 411 without putting breaks between them. So this way, by putting those breaks in, it puts them down on separate lines. Okay. So I apologize, section 1.2 is a little longer than I intended, but hopefully you got a lot out of it. I will see you next time in section 1.3.